We're going to take a look at the sonnet. The sonnet you see here on your screen is Shakespeare's "Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day." I'm going to read the poem for you, and then we're going to take it apart a little at a time so that you can see how the sonnet's form helps to showcase the main idea that Shakespeare is trying to get across here. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course, untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. All right, so here are the major components of the sonnet. First of all, as you probably noticed, it is 14 lines long. All of those lines contain strict iambic pentameter. In other words, remember from our previous lesson, the iamb is the simplest, most common foot in the English language, and it's one unstressed and one stressed syllable. Today. Dun 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 dun. So 14 lines of iambic pentameter, that's the 5 feet. Okay? Usually those lines are logically divided into 2 parts. The octave, which is the first 8 lines, and the sestet, which is the last 6 lines. The rhyme is constructed around 3 quatrains and a concluding couplet. So in other words, you'll have 8 lines, 3 quatrains, which would be the first 12 lines, and then the concluding couplet, which is the last 2 lines. So the set rhyme scheme will fall, because of that arrangement, it will fall under that umbrella. So it will be A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and G, G. Okay, and that's particular to the Shakespearean sonnet, which of course he invented. So let's look at the octave first, which is the first 8 lines. Second bullet here, they usually fit together logically. So you will notice as we look at the poem that the first 8 lines act as a unit. They may pose a question or give a setting, and they tend to set things up for the following sestet, that is the last 6 lines. And you'll see that Shakespeare is going to do this. So the sestet is the last 6 lines. Logically, they also fit together, and they often provide an answer or a response to the octave. And they are often marked by a contrasting transition of some sort, which you will see as we take the poem apart. The quatrains. The poem is also arranged around 3 quatrains, as I said earlier, and a concluding couplet. The rhyme scheme revolves around this, and the quatrains also have a central unity or a focus within each one. So you'll see as we go. So here's the first quatrain. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So you can see out here at the ends of the lines we have the rhyme scheme marked. The first sound, the long A sound of day, is rhyme letter number A, and then of course May also rhymes with that, so it gets an A. Temperate is the B sound, and date is a B sound. This is, by the way, this is a slant rhyme of sorts, and so you're going to see that it's actually, because it has the T sound, this is a different technique in poetry that's called alliteration, and that's the repetition of consonant sounds within words and sometimes at the beginning of words. So let's look at this. We talked about the rhyme scheme already. This is A, B, A, B. And look at the actual wording here. What is the poet saying in line 2? And what do lines 3 and 4 then do? So look at line 2. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. I would say if you don't know what temperate means, to get a dictionary and look it up. This is a good thing to do with any poetry. Temperate means less prone to extremes of hot and cold. It's different than, let's say, a summer's day in England, which was known to be quite a fleeting affair. The sun rarely shines in England in the summer, so it's difficult for Shakespeare to even really compare her, because summer doesn't last long enough. In fact, he goes on to say here in lines 3 and 4, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Think of like a lease on a house. You lease a house for 6 months or a year, or apartments or whatever. All too short a date. In other words, summer comes and goes way too quickly. Here's our second quatrain. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So look at number 1 here. What is the eye of heaven? What do you think that is? Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines. That is the sun. Again, remember, he is continuing to compare her to a summer's day. So sometimes he says the sun is too hot. And line 2 here, often is his gold complexion dimmed. What do you think that means? Well, if he's talking about the sun, the only way to get the gold complexion dimmed would be through cloud cover, which again, as I said, in England is pretty common. So look at point number 2 here. What happens to every fair from fair? What does it line 3 mean? And every fair from fair sometime declines. Well, if you think about it, he's saying things may start out fair, but eventually they turn to less than fair. They turn to a kind of a bleary, sort of a depressing day. In other words, that's what tends to happen to a summer's day in England, and it's also somewhat true with humans. We are fair when we are young, considered fair and lovely, and old age eventually will take us, either by chance. Sometimes here this can imply chance cloud cover or chance whatever kind of weather conditions, but in human terms it also can mean sometimes accidents or other things mar the beauty of a fair person by chance, or nature's changing course untrimmed. Nature's changing course would imply, of course, the seasons. And untrimmed means unstopped, unchanged. It's constant. Our third quatrain here. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. How is the poet claiming to keep his beloved from aging? Look at line 12, which is the last line here. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. He's saying that he can make her immortal, as it were, through this poem. And eternal lines to time, that's a nice way of saying that a poem is more permanent. And in many cases, that's very true. Poems are more permanent than the poet themselves or their subject matter. As long as they exist on the page, they are around. And they're fresh and new right then, as they have been. And so Shakespeare is saying that he can keep his lover immortal through these lines in this poem. So here's the concluding couplet. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So his original answer is As long as there are men around to read the poem and to appreciate it, she is essentially immortal. And what is this? So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Well, it's the poem. This poem gives life to thee. So the poet then is saying that as long as the poem, this, survives time, so too shall his lady. The poem then is the vehicle to give her immortality, as I've said, and 400 years later, it's still working, wouldn't you say? And maybe it will survive another 400 years.